Rod, excuse me, Rod participates in our open mic night, and that's held on the third Thursday of every month. So this past Thursday we had some new people, and we were featured in the Green Valley News in the Going Out section. We had a whole little thing just to ourselves as 5 great things to do for the week, so that helped with some attendance. But we're trying to build both an audience and a cadre of artists. So please mark your calendar for the third Thursday of the month. It's from 5 to 6:30, and it's really, really fun. And Rod and we have 3 guitarists besides Heather that come and sing with us, and that's Rod and Walt and James. So a lot of times when there's a little time left over at the end, they start jamming, and it's worth the whole price of admission, which by the way is free. It's a love offering. So please mark your calendar and come. We really would like to see this grow. So, end of commercial. And good morning. Well, our theme this month is Living Deep, the Process of Transformation. And so the whole month we've been looking at ways that we can deepen our understanding of what it means to be a spiritual being inhabiting this earthly body, and through that expanded understanding, create our own transformation, not only just for ourselves, but it also is for the planet that we live on. So we're learning to look with wonder, awe, and reverence at our life and at life itself, to look beyond what appears to be mundane to the gifts, lessons, and holiness that it contains. Last week, love it, Chuck. Bless his heart. Last week, I'm going to tell you a little story. The pump to our fountain out here stopped working, and it was completely dry. So Bruce came down and fixed it, and that's a pretty thankless, mundane task, which Bruce does a lot of those for us. But just a few minutes after the fountain began to flow again, the birds were back, bathing and drinking from their sacred water source. So that mundane task takes on a sense of the holy when we connect it to the life-giving gift that it is. And last Sunday we showcased Alan as a hero among us, and as he told his story, we could clearly see that the 10-year-old boy Alan took under his wing could have easily fallen through the cracks in our system to become another statistic. Because of Alan, Desi's life was transformed, and he now lives as a beautiful young adult with a job, a home, a car, and Alan is a friend for life. And I know that Alan has received those gifts in return. So these are some of the ways that we can change our outward perspective on how we see things so that our inward perspective begins to change too. But we're going to look at our process of transformation today from a little bit different perspective. Because not only must we learn to look at everyday events in new ways, but so many of us need to unlearn what we've come to accept as facts. So it's a matter of not only learning, but unlearning as well. Because there are so many things that we unconsciously accept and have come to believe, sometimes at a very early age, about our world, about others, and about ourselves. And so sometimes it is just those things that cloud our thinking and keep us from recognizing the truth. So our topic today, carefully taught, comes from the musical South Pacific. And 2 stories intertwine in this film. And they have the same theme. Nellie Forbush, a Navy nurse from Little Rock, Arkansas, falls in love with Emile, a French plantation owner who, unbeknownst to her, has 2 children from his deceased wife, a dark-skinned Polynesian woman. And when Nellie meets the children and realizes that they are Emile's, she cannot overcome her racial prejudices stemming from her Arkansas upbringing. In the parallel story, U.S. Marine Lieutenant Joe Cable arrives on the island for a dangerous spy mission which could turn the tide of the war against Japan. He meets and falls in love with Liette, a dark-skinned Tonkinese girl, but realizes that his prestigious military family would never approve of her. So in one scene, Emile, Nellie, and Joe have met and they're talking together. And Nellie tells Emile that she cannot marry him because of his black children, and asks Joe to help her explain why. Well, Joe is silent, so she tells Emile it was something that she was born with, and then she leaves to go back to the barracks. Emile asks Joe what he thinks, and Joe says emphatically, "No, we are not born that way. It happens after we're born." And he begins the song, "You've got to be carefully taught." You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, people whose skin are a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Yeah, me too. Well, going on with the story, because of his knowledge of the islands, Emile is cajoled into joining Joe on this dangerous mission. And in the meantime, Nellie learns to drop her prejudice and falls in love with the children. Joe makes up his mind to marry Liette when he returns from his mission, regardless of his family's disapproval. Joe doesn't get to fulfill his dream because he's killed in the line of duty. But Emile returns to find Nellie sitting with the children, as love in both cases wins out over the discrimination that had been carefully taught. So that's the Cliff Note version of South Pacific. But it really holds, it holds a lesson for all of us, because Nellie was far away from her Arkansas family and upbringing and home, and she was priding herself on accepting different people and circumstances. I mean, she was over in the Polynesian Islands, for goodness sake. But she didn't realize how deep her prejudices went until she was faced with raising partially black children as her own. We all have blinders to some of the ways that we have been carefully taught. And in fact, there's a phrase for it. It's called unconscious bias. And we all have it. We all have it. It isn't inherently bad or wrong, because it's a result of the brain's tendency to try to simplify the world. Because our brain is constantly inundated with more information than it could conceivably process. Mental shortcuts make it faster and easier for the brain to sort out all of this data. So our brain's natural tendency is to look for patterns and associations in the world. We store, process, and apply information about people or situations, and then we assess an immediate situation and react to it based on those previous associations. And for the most part, this makes absolutely perfect sense. Where it becomes a problem is when cultural conditioning, media, and family biases help make those associations. Then it becomes prejudice, with unsupported judgments in favor of or against one thing, person, or group as compared to another. You've got to be taught. You've got to be carefully taught. For our process of transformation to be successful, we need to be aware of those prejudices that we may be carrying and begin to unlearn them, to look at them. And I was looking through the different websites, and one website suggested that we slow down our thinking process, because we're most likely to give in to unconscious biases when we are busy, anxious, or under pressure. And it's here that I would suggest too, at least for me, if I start my day with meditation, spiritual contemplation, and deliberately set a tone for the day that love will be in action in all of my affairs, then I'm already prepared when those decisions come forward. And that way I'm going to be prone to listen to that still small voice and be guided by intuition rather than unconscious bias. And should I find myself under pressure, I can state that, and I can ask for more time to make an informed decision. You know, I told you about my friend who would never give me an answer without saying, I'm going to go home and pray for it and I'll let you know in the morning. And I loved it because she never got herself into saying yes when she really needed to say no. And again, the website also suggests that we empathize with the feelings of others. The Native American adage, "Great Spirit, help me never to judge another until I've walked in his moccasins," is a simple and powerful statement to help us put ourselves in another's place to uncover those unconscious stereotypes. And finally, the website said that unconscious stereotyping is reduced by focusing on counter evidence. That means to acknowledge and celebrate differences rather than to judge or fear them. At age 16, Amy Maddox wrote a poem that she called "Underneath, We're All the Same." He prayed, wasn't my religion. He ate, wasn't what I ate. He spoke, it wasn't my language. He dressed, wasn't what I wore. He took my hand, it wasn't the color of mine. But when he laughed, it was how I laughed. And when he cried, it was how I cried. So this process of unlearning is two-pronged. We bring our unconscious biases into consciousness so that we can actively release them and change the way we see the world, and that changes the world that we see. But we also have to look at ourselves. Where have we bought into a story or stories that tell us that we're not enough, we're not worthy, we're not perfect, we're not whole? Because if we're to experience a true transformation, we need not only to uncover our biases about the way we see the world, but how we see ourselves. To me, in order to live deep, to be in a process of transformation, which is our theme, I have to be in touch with and express my own authenticity. I have to be true to myself, my real self, so that I can best express God through me. I think it's true of each and every one of us. And we don't do it 100% of the time, none of us do. But that's the plan. That's the plan. And that's the gift I give myself when I do it. And it's a gift I give to the world. So the question for all of us is, am I being authentically me? And if not, why not? Where in our upbringing have we been taught to be inauthentic? And how can we release that old belief system so that we can move into being more truly who and what we were meant to be? Brene Brown, in The Gifts of Imperfection, writes, "Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are." And she says that choosing authenticity means to cultivate the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to exercise compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and to nurture the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. So again, so much of our transformational process takes place through unlearning. We have believed that because we're not perfect, we are not enough, we're not worthy. And for many of us, that meant we had to be even more perfect, hiding our mistakes or missteps so that we could be accepted, so that we could belong. Yet, in hiding those imperfections, we are actually cutting off who we are, pieces of who we are. Rebecca gave me the name of sent me something through the email and turned me on to an author and dream worker, Tokopa Turner. And she writes in Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. So long as we keep aspects of ourselves hidden from view because we believe only an edited or presentational version of who we are will be accepted by others, we are depriving ourselves of belonging. But also, and here's the piece that takes some real practice to see, depriving others of belonging with us. So it takes courage to embrace those parts of us that we would feel need to be hidden, and I think we all have those. But we cannot live deep, we cannot experience that transformation and true joy of authenticity that comes from it unless we do. And it doesn't mean that we need to call our best friend and dump on them and spill every single solitary stupid mistake and stunt we've ever made. But it does mean that when those events surface in our mind, that we watch our response. And if our cheeks feel hot, or if we want to brush it away, that's exactly the place that we need to care for ourselves. To come with that sense of authenticity. This is part of me too. This is part of me too. And it's a place where we can love ourselves into wholeness, knowing that these very imperfections are the gifts that can lead us, not only to authenticity, but to a sense of belonging. Brene Brown said it's setting boundaries and becoming vulnerable. And they're closely related, she mentions these. To be authentic, we need to say no more often than we do, oftentimes. Because people-pleasing can be a way of cutting off our authenticity, especially if we're in the habit of putting the feelings of others ahead of our own. Identifying where we need more space, self-respect, energy, personal power, and then taking action to fulfill those needs is a powerful step toward authenticity. And we can learn to embrace our vulnerability in a variety of ways. We can admit that we're afraid. We can ask for help. How many of us don't ask for help? Now, I have a terrible time asking for help. And yet I'm cutting off a piece of who I am when I need it, and I'm cutting off your opportunity to be of service to me, which will give you pleasure. You know, this is what we do when we don't ask for help. Admit a mistake. Realize that we've hurt someone's feelings and ask forgiveness. Or we can also step out of our comfort zone. Sign up for a class. You know, go to dinner alone or the movies alone. You know, we all have our own list of things that would push us off our comfort zone. So that's our assignment this week. Do something that pushes your comfort zone. Yeah, when we embrace vulnerability, our world opens and we have a sense of freedom. When we hide our vulnerability, we can only show up partially. The level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. So as we work to reclaim those parts of ourselves that are afraid of being seen, hurt, or left behind, we strengthen that sense of belonging. So I believe that we can say that having the courage to be vulnerable is essential to our process of transformation. Not only does it change us from the inside out, but from it then we have more compassion for others, and we experience a sense of connection and of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. Brene Brown says vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. Our path of transformation embraces our authenticity, and through our vulnerability, we can become an authentic source of joy, courage, empathy, creativity, and love for ourselves. And that's how we transform the world. Thank you. Namaste.